Welcome to the Green Room, where we discuss ways to green up our world. Lately, it seems every year we discover new ways the products we buy are harming human and environmental health. Microplastics are an example. Here to talk with us today is Rebecca Esselman, Executive Director of the Huron River Watershed Council. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you all are doing a great job raising awareness on microplastics, and you've got 3 videos that are really great. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to just start out the show by showing one.
Sure, I think that'd be a great way to start.
Great. Here we go. We'll show it now.
Microplastics are tiny particles of plastic that pollute our local waterways, even the Huron River. Microplastics enter the Huron from a variety of sources. Most athletic clothing is made from plastic. So is fleece. These synthetic fibers are responsible for the majority of our local microplastic pollution. Microplastics are so tiny that when they enter our water system, they don't get filtered out during the water treatment process. Now, combine this with other issues like the spread of microplastics from plastic bottles, the use of easily damaged containers like styrofoam, and the overuse of disposable plastic packaging. And you've got a huge pollution problem. Now it's time for us to do something about it. If we all take action, we can drastically reduce the output of microplastics into the Huron River.
So that was a really nice intro, and now let's get into some details. So microplastics, when I wrap my head around it, it seems like there's 2 types. One is when they're in the product, like microbeads, and one is when the product's broken apart, right? Does that sound about right?
That's right, yeah. Microplastics really is just a catch-all name for any fragment of plastic that's generally characterized as less than 5 millimeters. So it's the really teeny things that often you can't even see with your naked eye.
And what are microbeads?
Microbeads are just round versions of a microplastic, but they were very popular for a while in health and beauty products. They were replacing more natural alternatives. I remember having an apricot scrub, you know, that had apricot in the scrub itself for cleansing. And over time, those got replaced by small beads of plastic. And eventually we came to realize that, of course, those beads stay with us long after the product's been used. And so now there's some effort going into getting those out of our beauty products.
So would you say that most products don't have them anymore, or
I know in the European Union, it's been regulated so that they cannot be utilized in beauty products anymore. I actually believe there might have been Michigan state legislation that regulated the same. I can't speak to whether there's still plastics in the stuff that you buy at the store today.
There's an interesting chart in terms of where most of it comes from. And I'd always thought that microbeads were like the biggest thing, but apparently that's like less than 2%. And what are some of the bigger things that we need to consider?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So there was a lot of media attention focused on the microbeads for a while, but it really is a small percentage of all microfibers or microplastics that we see. 70% of all the microplastics that we see in the Great Lakes can be sourced back to textiles and our clothing, actually.
That was a big shock to me, especially because the #1 thing they mentioned was fleece.
Right.
And I love my fleeces. I don't know how, I've got like 5 different fleeces. And athletic clothing,
Yes.
That really surprised me.
Yeah, so any of our synthetic fabrics, and people don't realize this, but you're essentially wearing plastic. So your nylon, your polyester, your fleece. And the irony about the fleece is that, you know, a lot of people that are wearing this activewear are environment lovers. They're out in their favorite places, you know, enjoying nature, but they are wearing these textiles that are the source of one of our mounting problems for environmental impact.
Yeah, I read that one fleece jacket can shed 250,000 microfibers in just one washing, which, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yep. So we can start with choices around our textiles, what we wear and how we care for them. you know, as an individual wanting to take action on this issue, it's a great place to start.
Well, as long as we're talking about that, I'll get out this bag I just ordered, and it's really kind of cool. It's large because I was feeling so guilty about my fleeces, so it's big enough that I can put, you know, quite a few in there, and my husband's athletic gear, etc. So I hear that's something you're considering giving out with your memberships?
Yeah, so as we are talking with folks about microplastics issues, we also always try to give people some actions that they can take, from what you can do at your home to how you can change your consumer practices to how you can advocate for legislation or regulations that'll help. But you know, part of what you can do as an individual at the household level is keep those microfibers from ending up in our sewer system, because the ultimate fate of that water is to go back into our rivers and lakes. So those microfibers end up right back in our rivers via our washing machines. So there's a couple of products, you know, there's a lot of innovation in this area now, and these technologies emerging to help us deal with these issues, and these bags are one of them. So you put your synthetic fibers in them, you run your wash as normal, and it traps those fibers, and then you can dispose of them. You're still disposing of them, but in a landfill rather than a water body, so arguably they're more contained. Yeah.
Kind of like the lint you take off your screen in your dryer.
That's
you
right.
Put that in your trash, you don't put it in your water.
That's right, and if you looked at that under a microscope, you would probably see a lot of microplastics.
And on that list on that chart of the different sources, plastic bags is the next highest, I guess when they break apart, right? That's where that comes from.
Yeah, so we talked about kind of things that are already micro when they end up in our environment, like our textiles, and then there's the macroplastics, like our bags and bottles that break down over time, and then they leave fragments behind.
They never go away, sounds like.
They never go away. Yeah.
They just get smaller and smaller. And then styrofoam is another category, and that is responsible for 8%, I guess. So that kind of surprised me. I didn't even realize that styrofoam was part of this problem. One way I've been dealing with reducing my use of styrofoam is to, when I go to a restaurant, I frequently don't finish all my food, so instead of getting one of those foam clamshells, I bring in a container that snaps tightly, and then I also bring in a bag. And then when I'm done with my sandwich or whatever, I put the rest of it in there. Apparently, I checked with the health department, and they said that's okay as long as you're not handing the container to the staff member.
Okay.
So that's another thing, you know, just these little things. Also, I've been trying to, when we get takeout, ask the store not to put in the cutlery.
Right.
Because I guess those things can break apart in our waterways eventually.
Yeah, you can ask for no cutlery, no condiments. You know, you think about the mustard and ketchup packets and stuff that they just put in there by default. If you don't need that stuff because you're taking it home, just ask them to leave it out. And you know, you also hear a lot about people trying to not use straws anymore, or restaurants actually choosing not to serve your beverages with straws. So another action people can take is in a place that they frequent, especially if it's a local business, ask them to, you know,
hold the straw.
Hold the straw.
Yeah. We don't use straws at home, so why, or at least I don't, when I drink water.
Yeah, exactly.
And then fragments, as we've been talking about, like plastic water bottles, those are 17%, I guess. And yeah, as you said, clothing, 70%. Wow. So what are the impacts of all these things in terms of human and environmental health?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you know, there is the human health impacts, and then just the fact that these have become ubiquitous in our environment, in our land, in our soil, in our oceans. We have some good knowledge about the way that it impacts the environment and human health, and I think we have a lot more to learn. I think we'll be, you know, things will be revealing themselves about the health impacts of plastics in our system for a long time now. One of the staggering statistics that I heard when learning about all of this is that between our food, our bottled water, even our drinking water, all the ways that we, and even breathing in, you can breathe in these microfibers and fabrics.
Really?
Inhalation is another pathway that
Great.
these end up in our system. The average person consumes about a credit card's worth of plastic each week.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of that passes through our system, some of it sticks around. But the human health impacts, one of the primary things we know most about is plastics are endocrine disruptors, and the chemicals that leach out of plastics as they break down over time interrupt our endocrine system, and so it has a lot of impacts on anything that our hormones affect, our reproductive systems. I remember when I was in graduate school, I read this book by Theo Colburn called Our Stolen Future, and it's a book about endocrine disruption and plastics making it into to us as individuals and all the havoc it wreaks on our systems. And it was an incredibly impactful book, and the author actually came and spoke at our university, and she carried her own water in because of her research, and this was before there was a whole lot of stigma around drinking bottled water. She was abstaining from drinking from bottled water because of what leaches out of plastics and does harm in our body. And I remember that was a point in time in my education where I was really alerted to the problems of plastics, not just for our environment, but for ourselves.
So it's not just the physical properties, like I know the animals and stuff are, choking on these things, but it's the things that leach out of them. So
Exactly.
that's a double whammy.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard that the Huron River has the highest level of microplastics of any river in Michigan. Why would that be?
It's a dubious honor, right?
Yeah.
It could be, we don't know why, and it could be that on different days of different sampling, those results would come out different. But the main take home for me is that our river systems are contributing a lot of microplastics to our Great Lakes. Great Lakes are our drinking water source. They are an ecosystem that we should be trying to protect. And, we are realizing what a significant source our rivers are to that problem. There's a couple of ways that we think that the microplastics are getting to our river systems. We talked about one of them already, like through our wastewater. Also, through the wastewater system, there are biosolids that are spread on farm fields as fertilizers, and the microplastics are there as well. So in addition to directly discharging into rivers, they can run off of farm fields during rain events. The Huron is not the most agricultural watershed they sampled. It's not the most urban, so it wasn't obvious at first brush why the Huron had the most. But there's definitely more questions to be answered around this.
Pretty new area to be. There's not a whole lot of research that has been done yet, right?
That's right. And that study was 2016, so it hasn't been a lot of time that we've had that knowledge and have had time to dig deeper.
So on your website it says something about some nets that you've fabricated to try to, special nets, to locate where the worst problems are in the Huron?
Yeah, so microplastics have been studied more in oceans and lakes and less in river systems, and our staff scientist wanted to understand the significance of the issue in the Huron. If we found microfibers, where, were there patterns where we could find more and areas where there were less? And so he said there was no real equipment to do that sampling. So they devised a piece of equipment that's essentially a large net that you put into flowing water that filters that water into a small vial at the end, and then you can look at that vial under a microscope and quantify how much plastic you see. So it was an interesting endeavor to kind of innovate in that space and come up with something that would help us answer that question. the data that we have is very preliminary. It was not a scientific study, just an investigative study. But the short story is everywhere we looked, we found it.
That's an unfortunate point.
It is.
Well, so there's a lot of different things, even that we didn't mention. I heard, you know, trying to wash your clothes less often. I mean, the ones that are especially damaging, just all kinds of things. And mostly they were related to consumer behavior, things that we can do. And I'm wondering about the manufacturers themselves, whether maybe they should be doing some things like maybe making sure their products are easily recyclable, or maybe even pay for recycling. And I got that idea because there's a bill in Congress right now where they, if it passed, they would mandate that. Another thing I just thought of, and I'll see what you think of this, because I love fleece so much, I was trying to think, how could they deal with that? So I wondered whether maybe the manufacturers could give out coupons with each item that would be for, you know, say a bag like that or whatever, the laundry bag that I showed earlier, so that not only would it raise awareness for the consumers, but also, you know, right now that the price that the manufacturers are charging us is based on their price to manufacture the product, and it's not accounting for all those other, you know, damages to our health and our environment and the cleanup costs and everything. So I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, the price of the goods we consume really does not accurately capture the total cost of a product, and we see that across things that we manufacture. Plastics, once we create them, they're with us in perpetuity unless they're incinerated. Every piece of plastic that we've created so far is still on this planet, and it's really hard to even quantify the cost of, you know, the impacts to our environment, to our human health, as a result of these synthetic products being in our environment. Yeah.
So can we get it out of our municipal water through the treatment plant? I mean, the filters at the treatment plant.
Currently, most wastewater treatment plants are not filtering out microfibers.
And I read that people should not turn to bottled water because tests have shown that 93% of bottled waters have it. In fact, some of them even twice the levels of tap water.
Yeah, I've seen similar numbers. I'm not exactly sure why there's more in bottled water versus tap water, but we do find it in tap water as well, beer, everywhere you look. So, you know, our first course of action is to consume less and use less plastic. Just look for places where they're non-essential, find alternatives, and eliminate kind of our single-use plastics and non-essential uses. You know, there's some very good reasons to utilize plastic, and then there's some things like the plastic straw example. It's just not necessary. And you know, as far as our fleece goes and our textiles, you know, some of these things we already have in our home. So the bags and you know, options like that are good. Washing your fabrics less means less shedding. But then the next time you go to buy something, look for you know, natural materials, or purchase less, and that sends a clear message to the textile industry and the athletic apparel industry that we're looking for something different.
Buy your fleeces secondhand.
Yeah, that's another option.
I can't live without my fleeces. So someone asked me how Great Lakes microplastic situation is different than the oceans, and they gave me the statistic that by 2050 oceans are expected to contain more plastics by weight than fish even. And so I was just wondering, you know, I know that's a horrible problem in the oceans, but why are we so worried about it in the Great Lakes?
Yeah, I'd say that the primary difference with the Great Lakes and plastics is that it is a drinking water source. So there's a lot of environmental impacts and ecosystem impacts to ocean plastics. Everybody's got those images in their head of the seabirds and the whales with bellies full of plastic, and it's really tragic. But in a freshwater system, you're dealing with the additional issue of drinking water and that human exposure pathway.
Where can people go for more information on this topic?
Well, you saw one of the videos at the beginning of this piece. We have 2 other additional videos available at our website, which is hrwc.org.
Okay.
These are shareable pieces, so another action that an individual can take is to just help spread the word and make people aware of this. So, you know, share those videos. We also have some content on our website that gives people more information on the microplastic issue locally and globally.
Great. Well, thanks for all you're doing on this important topic. It's great.
You're welcome.
And thanks for being here today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
For this and all our Green Room shows, please go to washtenaw.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us in the Green Room.